Welcome to Leadership Winston-Salem's Leaders in Lunch webinar on transportation, a deeper dive as a follow-up conversation to our conversation in late 2024. For those of you who may be less familiar with Leadership Winston-Salem, we are a nonprofit organization that works with over 100 community leaders each year to educate, connect, and energize them to serve and improve the community through our flagship and insight programs. Hosting webinars like this one is just one of the ways that we continue to educate our class members and stay connected to our alumni. At this time, I would like to introduce our sponsor for today's webinar, Mike Tramber from Miracles in Sight. Mike Tramber is the Vice President of Operations and responsible for developing long-term strategies, creating lean and efficient operational processes, improving customer relationships, and monitoring the success of each operational department. Mike started his career in the organ, tissue, and eye donation industry more than 20 years ago as a recovery technician, where his skills and attention to detail helped him routinely win the coveted Technician of the Month award. He later moved to Carolina Donor Services as Tissue Recovery Manager, where he led the department to win the Golden Quill and Golden Scalpel Awards for minimal errors in both documentation and surgical technique. Mike came to Miracles in Sight in 2006, where he quickly was able to use his skills to forge many processes and procedural improvements and lead the company to become one of the top eye banks in the world. Mike is an advocate for donation, active on multiple EBAA communities, and leads technician and education trainings and lectures on eye banking domestically and abroad. After graduating high school, Mike enlisted in the U.S. Army as a laboratory technician and worked towards completing a diploma in surgical technology. He received his Bachelor's of Science in Healthcare Administration from Mount Olive College and his Master's of Business Administration from Winston-Salem State University. Make sure I get that right. Thank you, Mike, for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thank you. Miracles in Sight is proud to sponsor Leadership Winston-Salem's Lunch and Learn. And our president and CEO, Ingrid Chunder, is also excited to be a part of the Inside Group. A little bit about Miracles in Sight. We are the fourth largest eye bank in the world, and we're located right here in the Triad. With more than 70 years under our belt, our mission is the restoration, preservation, and enhancement of sight through transplant research, education, and innovation. In short, we connect donors and recipients. What this does is allows a sense of purpose, gives a sense of meaning and or legacy for the donor's life, for the surviving family, while invigorating the life of the recipient. I'd like to thank you for the work that you do, and we are very thrilled to be a part of Leadership Winston-Salem. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike, for being here today, and thank you to Miracles in Sight for all of the work that you do in our community and your support of Leadership Winston-Salem. For today's discussion, Claudia Barrett, LWS Class of 2022, will be our moderator. Claudia has over 20 years experience in the education sector, and she currently works with nonprofit organizations to maximize their potential. She is also the committee chair for our Alumni Council Educator Committee. Claudia will take over after hearing from our lived experience guests, Drew and Will Bethay. Of note, as some of you may have seen, one of our lived experience guests is actually not here with us today. He's unable to join us this afternoon. However, he is allowing us to share his story as food for thought as we launch in today's discussion. Drew Greer, a Navy veteran who sought assistance from Goodwill Veteran Services in need of housing, employment, and transportation support, has shared his story with transportation struggles in our community. During a call with his case manager, Drew was evicted from their home. After diligently working towards housing goals for almost 2 months, Drew finally found a place that is perfect for his large family. However, he soon discovered that his car required more repairs than initially anticipated and that he could afford at that time. Drew and his significant other have 7 children between them. 5 of whom are under the age of 15. They are 12, 4, 2 years old, and 8-month-old twins. This family is currently relying on public transportation exclusively to get their kids from school, work, and appointments, which is sometimes quite stressful for the families. Some days, the family needs to split up to make sure that everyone gets where they need to be. However, as of note, if you ever see this family in public, you'll never know that they're going through anything because they always look so happy. And thank you, Drew, for allowing us to share that story today. Next, we're going to hear from Will Buffet, LWS flagship class of 2020. Will, please tell the group about yourself and share your story, as well as things you have seen in other communities regarding public transportation.
Can y'all hear me? And start my video, okay. Can you see me, hear me?
Yes, we can hear
we
you.
can hear you, Will.
Hello? Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you, Frida, for giving me a chance. And transportation is dear and near to me because in 2015, I actually had my car repossessed. And I ended up taking a bus from Winston-Salem to Greensboro daily. So they started calling me the #1 bus rider. But what I observed over the time is how important transportation is, not just for me who had the ability to still have a car, but for those who didn't have the ability. And I used to always look at little things like comparing, not to compare cities, but I think it's fair to compare us to a Greensboro or a High Point. And one of the things that I notice is each different city has a plan that is a little different. And when it came down to, let me say, Galaxy. Okay. What I did was I looked up something just to get an idea of the what Winston-Salem is in a city of walkability. And Winston-Salem, this was something that I looked at on one of the city's websites. We had an average score of 22. That same kind of measurement was given to Greensboro. And Greensboro scored an 87, which their city is very walkable. One of the things I've noticed in Greensboro is there are sidewalks everywhere. As you're leaving out of the city on whether it's Market Street or Gifford College Road, these are on the outside of downtown. They scored very well. Winston-Salem only scores well when it comes to downtown. But in my neighborhood, which is off of Peters Creek, you have a bus stop that has a sidewalk that goes a few feet, and then it becomes grass right at the bus stop. And it's almost like I can only imagine having to do that. So I'm here because I always like to think for the common man, the regular man, that how am I supposed to navigate if I have to walk through, grass and all of these things. So I'm just trying to see how maybe we can kind of connect the city via sidewalk. And that would allow people to sometimes get to walking more so than having to rely on transportation, even though transportation is good, but it would allow us a chance to, walk more. And I think that improves our health and mental state. But that's all I wanted to say because I've been riding the bus, even though I've been driving now for the past maybe 7 years. But for 3 years, I did ride our bus and I had to be at the bus stop at 5 a.m. every morning. So I'm just thanking you again for having me on this panel. And I look forward to hearing others' ideas as well. Thank you.
Will, thank you so very much for your for your transparency in sharing your story. You bring up a lot of great points there in terms of transportation and walkability and accessibility, and some of the issues that are still surrounding our community today. So thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing that story. At this time, I will turn it over to Claudia, and she will introduce our remaining panelists, and we'll get into today's discussion.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Frida. Frida, your sound was a little staticky, just FYI. So thank you all so much for continuing this conversation with us on transportation, driving change in Winston-Salem. We're so glad to have a wonderful group of panelists with us today, including Amy Stevens, who is Executive Director of the Enrichment Center. The Enrichment Center empowers individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities to grow as individuals, live with dignity, and have choice in how they fulfill their lives. The Enrichment Center also employs individuals with disabilities. We have Jeff Bansler with us, who is in the LWS class of 2025, so currently going through Leadership Winston-Salem. Director of Transportation for Winston-Salem. And then we have Brandy Peterson and Takia Alston. Takia is LWS class of 2016, representing RATP Development USA and the Winston-Salem Transit Authority. So thank you all so much for joining us. We are really going to have just an open dialogue, informal conversation around the topic of transportation. And I would encourage all of our participants to please add any questions that you may have in the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. So we're going to start off our conversation just with our panelists to have an opportunity to respond to Will as he shared his lived experience of needing to utilize transportation, and then the common story that we hear from individuals like Drew who have a family that is reliant on transportation. So I just want to open it up real quickly to any of our panelists who may have a question for Will or a comment regarding what we've heard from the lived experience.
Thank you, Claudia. I'm happy to take that one. And just at first, I'll comment a little bit about what we heard from Will. You know, he recognized one of the foundational problems with transit service is that you have to have accessibility to get to the bus stop. And I think, you know, that's a challenge that we face, we deal with every day regarding our ability to provide infrastructure such as sidewalk or separated facilities to safely catch the bus, right? And so one of the things that the city of Winston-Salem manages is a master sidewalk improvement list, and transit is and access to transit is one of the key criterion that establishes a priority for how we fund those improvements. And so while dollars are often limited, transit, I'm happy to say, is a key factor in locations that we consider where to fund those type of improvements. And so we have a big job. We have many bus routes that have those needs. And so we work with our operators, we work with WISTA to make sure that we can have as much safety accommodation as we can to get folks to these stops safely. But our work is very clear that we need to continue to fund, exercise, and design facilities that provide access to the fixed route and paratransit system.
Thank you so much for that, Jeff. Anybody else have any comments or questions for Will? All right, well, I am going to start, Amy, with you. I have a question. How have the vans, and this is another common theme that we hear, is that many nonprofits purchase their own transportation to support the barriers or to help address the barriers that their participants face. How have the vans that purchased by the Enrichment Center addressed the transportation barriers for your employees?
I would say it's not so much for our employees, but those that attend here. We depend on TransAid, and I have to say, shout out to TransAid, because I've worked in 14 states and never have I had the cell phone number of someone that I can call, like Takia, that can help me. What do you need? How can I help you? So I just first want to start with that. Out of the 14 states, never have I had that. So thank you, Takia. I look to TransAid and parents and some of our staff to pick up our participants and to take them home. So we serve about 120 people, and that's our main mode of transportation. We depend on TransAid. If they can't deliver, we can't bring in revenue. We can't stay open. So it's a partnership that we couldn't live without. But once they arrive, I can't call TransAid for every time we want to go to the mall or go to a movie or go to work or go take them on a tour somewhere. So we've had to purchase vehicles out of pocket to be able to do those transports once they arrive here. It's extremely expensive. I'll be honest, it's about $100,000 for a handicapped vehicle. And we have 3. So we do not use them on a daily basis when it comes to transport, though, because we just can't maintain them. And we don't have any grant funding or any additional funding. Medicaid doesn't pay for that. So we have found that it's the only way for people to live at least some type of a normal life. They can get out, they can go places and try to live and socialize and do different things that are pretty normal. And that's new, unfortunately, to the IDD world. And those of you that don't know me, I represent the intellectual and developmental disability world here in Winston. So I think it's pivotal to them living a good life and to try to mimic a little bit of what we do every day. So, but that does not get them here or get them home. If they can't get here, they don't have those opportunities. So those 3 vehicles we have that we were able to purchase in the past 2 years have made all the difference to getting us out in the community and being more community-based. Hope that answers your question.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. And that brings up a point. We had to reschedule this Leaders in Lunch because of weather and transportation barriers. So 3 of our 4 panelists were dealing with transportation issues on that morning. So I appreciate you sharing that with us. Also, can you share any success stories, Amy, of how improved transportation, like having the vans, being able to take your IDD participants out into the community, how has that positively impacted their lives and the lives of their families?
We're an art program, so we're able to go sing at the Mayor's Council at Christmas, and we're able to go to the Dash game and sing the Star Spangled Banner, and these are things that we would have never been able to transport everyone. We had to pay $2,000 a day to get to the fair. We go every year. It's our annual trip for 42 years. We go to the fair, and we were paying $2,000 for a 2-hour trip to the fair. And now we're able to take them on our own. Now we have to do several trips, but it's well worth it. And we don't have to spend that extra or have donors donate money in order to fund the transportation. So it's made a daily difference for us, for not just one person getting out, but 15 to 30 people getting out in the community every day. So it's made a huge difference in their life. We actually have a group of guys. It's called 5 Guys, like the burger place. And we bought a Honda van, and they go out every day in the Honda van and live a normal life. They learn to go change the oil, to wash the van, to get gas, all the things they've never done at 40 to 60 years old. They're able to go out and do that. And that's made a huge difference in their life. So
that's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that. So RATP Development USA has recently been awarded a multi-year operations contract with the City of Winston-Salem to provide operations and maintenance services for the Winston-Salem Transit Authority. I'm opening this up to Jeff, Brandy, Takia. Would any of you like to get us started on talking about how that partnership is going, if there's any updates you'd like to share with us?
Well, I want to recognize Randy and Takia for their great work. So I'll just say, I would like them to have the first floor to talk about their really great work in our city. We have made a really dramatic shift in how we deliver transit service, which allows us to plan better for service enhancements and efficiencies down the road. Where previously we spent a lot of time just in the operation space. So now we've offloaded a lot of that responsibility to RATP Dev, and I'd like for Brandy and Taki to talk a little bit about that because they do the work. And I'm happy to say that it has freed our staff up to think about what transit could be moving forward.
Right. And I'll definitely take that volley. Thanks, Jeff. One of the things that RATP Dev really looked at when we first got here, and we did start in August this previous year, were the efficiencies and how can we provide more effective transportation services. Getting people from point A to point B is great, but getting them from point A to point B on time is even better. So that's something that we're really, really fighting to work towards right now. So there's so many factors that play into that. You know, there's who's going where and what time they need to be there. There's how many wheelchairs we can fit on one vehicle, how many mobile people can we fit on a vehicle, and all of that math has to kind of be done in the background before the trip is even booked. So we have recently brought in some very great technology that helps us and assists us in that. And through doing that, we realized that we were really overbooking the capability of the system as a whole. Whether we didn't have enough drivers or enough vehicles or enough hours in the day. Sometimes that can honestly be one of the things that we're looking at. So we have been able to broaden the scope of what we're looking at to try and build in efficient transportation. Getting people picked up on time, getting people to where they need to go on time. Those, some of these are life-saving trips. They're medical necessity trips. And that's specifically with TransAid. But we're also looking at our fixed route services as a whole as well, because there are different abilities that can utilize our services on fixed route. So we're really looking at that, and there's some big changes coming here in later this month that we want people to start looking at the website, seeing, the changes that are coming, seeing how much more accessible fixed route services are going to be because we have better availability. So I'm more than happy to answer any questions, but it has been a wonderful partnership with the city of Winston-Salem. We're really digging in deep, and change takes time. So a lot of things are changing very quickly, but also they have to take their amount of time to work out all of the bugs and kinks that can come up in that. So, but yes, any questions?
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. Yes, no, that's encouraging, very exciting. I know I have heard personally from folks that say sometimes on the weekends it's just really challenging to get transportation into the city if they are living out in some of the neighborhoods outside of the city. So we will continue to look and enjoy the information that you're sharing on the website as far as that goes. Also, in terms of RATP Dev, you have contracts in several other counties, including Greensboro, Wake County, Durham, and Raleigh. So we heard from Will about the walkability of Greensboro versus Winston-Salem. Can you share with us any other successful projects or initiatives that you've been able to implement in any of those counties that you can see replicable for Winston-Salem?
Yeah, actually I can. Thank goodness I was involved in a lot of those. But so and just to add to that, we also do have Asheville and Buncombe County in North Carolina also. So with Greensboro, we've had quite a long partnership with them, and we've been able to work through a lot of different issues. And one of the things that I can really say is the openness and willingness to look at every possible thing that we can do to make things more walkable, rideable, all of those things. I can see that in the leadership of Winston-Salem, the Department of Transportation, Jeff specifically, Kelly, being able and willing to look at the hard things, like, do we have enough sidewalks? Like, different problems that we have at different bus stops. Being able to really dig in, those are the kinds of initiatives that we're digging into now, as a partnership, being able to look at those things. One of the things that makes the most difference is that engagement from the community in helping us to see some of the things that it's a big community. So having that feedback is always welcome. Just like Amy said, having our cell phone numbers and telling us, hey, there's a problem. We're really digging in and diving in to try and fix those. But as far as the walkability of Greensboro versus, Winston-Salem or any of these large communities, it comes down to a process of finding what works best, because no two communities are the same. So for Winston, what might work may not work for Greensboro. So being open to all of those different things is definitely where I see things working for us.
Absolutely. And Winston-Salem is unique to us. And so, Jeff, do you have anything you'd like to add to follow up on that question?
Yeah, happy to. A couple things. Let me say this. I'll mention is you heard us talk a little bit about the service changes that we're trying to implement, right? And so we benchmark a lot of peer cities. We talk about what other places do. RATP Dev is a provider for a number of areas, but we also are studying those areas. We've looked at Durham. We've looked at Greensboro specifically when we crafted the RFP to ultimately hire RATP Dev. We are benchmarking peer agencies in this space across the state. We even went as far as Colorado to look at some transit operations out there. And so that very much a collective effort to get this new model. But one of the things, we talked a lot last time about what was our plan for the future. You heard me mention just a moment ago is that, by allowing some of the operational components of providing public transportation, offloading that to a contractor allows the transit planning staff that the city of Winston-Salem have to engage in transit planning, right? And that's a key component. We need someone that their focus every day, they come to work and they do transit planning. How do I put the buses, the routes, and the places that they need to be to serve the most people and do the most good with the most the dollars that we allocate every year? And in doing that, you heard Brandy mention, I don't think she gave enough credit to the work that she's doing. But at the end of this month, we will be launching some different service. And that'll include some frequency changes where we're going to actually take some buses and go from a 60-minute headway, an hour of bus, to every 30-minute headways. And so that's doubling that frequency. And we're very strategic in how we roll some of these things out. And this information is available online. But the thought process there is to take some and recycle some routes that have ridership demand that is certainly not there, and then put those same operators and same buses on the routes that have the most demand. And we did a whole study on ridership where we have the frequency need, and it was real clear that we could take and recycle some hours, operating hours. In other words, utilizing the same bus, the same operator, basically the same fixed cost, and then put more rides out to our community on the routes that need it the most. And so we're going to be launching that service on a couple routes, particularly Route 83 and 107. Those are going to go from 60-minute to 30-minute headways, and 87 being the biggest ridership, the largest ridership route that we have in the city. And then we're also looking at ways to think about this holistically. Now, while that is something we're committing to at the end of the month, one of the things our council adopted earlier this year, actually the first council meeting in January, was to think bigger than that. Now, while it's currently unfunded, what we're aspiring to is some crosstown routes. Right now, as you all know, if you have any understanding of the public transportation system in Winston-Salem, it's very much hub and spoke. You take a route to the transit center, you may transfer there and you go back out. But the crosstown routes allow that to be delivered differently. And so we're going to have, we've recommended 4 crosstown routes that those buses do not come downtown, but they essentially connect where we have job centers to where we have folks that would need access to those jobs. And if you subset that even further, you drill down even further, we've also overlaid that with the frequency improvements. In other words, where the crosstown routes intersect with the higher frequency ridership, higher frequency routes, you really expand the capability of moving people to those job areas. And so that's some of the methodology we used to create some crosstown service performance metrics that allow us to connect more folks to more jobs more frequently. So I'll mention that while step 1 is to really increase frequency at a net zero budget allocation, long term, we're exploring funding opportunities to introduce some crosstown routes to further that and really leverage the changes we're making here at the end of the month.
So Jeff, let me ask you just, so as somebody who does not have to rely on public transportation, I'm assuming the increase in frequency is going to decrease the transit time that folks are spending on the buses, going to work, going to medical appointments, and all of that. Is that correct?
So that's a great point. When you think about terms of public transportation, time is a key component. And for us as transportation professionals, we think about time in 2 ways: the time spent waiting for the bus and the time riding on the bus, right? Both of which affect your daily transportation planning efforts. And you have to plan your day around that. So if we can introduce a more frequent bus, that really decreases the amount of time you're on the bus and that you're waiting for that, because it's coming every 30 minutes. And you know that it's going to get where you need to go and have that return trip much quicker as well. So by doing that time element, we're trying to give that back. In some of our survey data, it confirmed this for us. One of the biggest barriers to public transportation that we had in this city was the 60-minute headway. And so we're trying to address some of those barriers.
Perfect.
Right.
Thank you. We do have a question from one of our participants. I live in the Peters Creek area where they recently built a sheet. As Mr. Bethia mentioned, there is a lack of safe walkable areas. My main concern now is having crosswalk that spans the road between Parkland High School and the new sheets. I'm afraid someone's kid will get hurt simply crossing the street to grab a snack. How can we advocate for this?
This one seems like it's in my space. I will take this one. So this is a great question. Certainly we have dealt with this specific issue at the City of Winston-Salem DOT level for a few months very specifically. I'll say this. In the terms of pedestrian treatments, and sometimes we use the term accommodations. Well, really, you can argue they need to be there regardless. They're not an accommodation. They're just standards that we need to aspire to. And so in that space, we have worked with the North Carolina DOT to actually design and build pedestrian signals. And we've been on record to say we're shooting to have those designed built by the start of school in August. Now, the reason that was possible, and well, why didn't you do that in previously? Well, it goes back to an infrastructure need. There was no sidewalks or ADA accommodations on the west side of Peters Creek. With the sheets development, they put that in through ordinance requirements. It opened the door for us to come in behind that and put in a traffic signal improvement to engage the signal to actually you could push a button, actuate the signal, and cross. Now, it's still multi-lane, a little bit higher speed, high volume, so crossing will always be a concern, and we're going to design it with those metrics in mind. But I'm happy to say that we're marching forward with a partnership with NCDOT, fully funded to improve that crossing.
Wonderful. And then also there was a comment regarding if the speed limit should be reduced to 45 until passing the Walmart, because it increases to 55 right before the Goodwill. So I don't know if that's part of the conversation of the transit plan around that area.
So we have had that request as well. A little bit of nuance is the North Carolina DOT does have ownership over Peters Creek Parkway. And so that type of decision will have to come from the North Carolina DOT. But I will say we have a lot of complicated metrics to think about what riders will do and what we sign them to do, and then what we ask our enforcement staff to do. Now, Peters Creek's long and straight, and no matter what we sign it, people are going to do what roads that are long and straight allow folks to do, right? So we have to think about those things. So we are actually reviewing that request with our partners at NCDOT right now. I don't have a great response about the feasibility of a speed limit reduction. Just know that what we sign and what we expect folks to drive aren't always the same.
Right. Wonderful. Thank you. Takia, I'm going to ask you this question. So how does RATP Dev and like TransAid, how do you address the specific needs of families, veterans, and individuals, let's say with disabilities, who rely on public transportation? Can you share a little bit about what your role is in making that happen for us?
Absolutely, be more than welcome to do that. So I'm the ADA manager here at the Winston-Salem Transit Authority, RATP Dev. My role here is I'm responsible for making sure our clients who have disabilities have the capabilities of being able to access either our fixed route services or our paratransit services. I'm not sure if everyone knows that our fixed route buses are wheelchair accessible. So anyone who utilizes a wheelchair, scooter, walker, any type of mobility device would be able to get on our vehicles more easily with those wheelchair lifts or lifts. And so does our paratransit service. Our vehicles are low floor, so they would be able to navigate on and off easily. With the fixed route services, we have a half fare program. So those with disabilities, senior citizens, even veterans would be able to access our services. They would be able to pay a half price versus full fare. So just showing some type of identification that would let our operators know that they are to pay half price versus the full fare. We do offer travel training for those who don't know how to navigate a fixed route system. So we would go out with them individually and do a training session with them. Just depending on the disability, some of them might require maybe a couple of trainings just to get them more acclimated to the service. With the paratransit service, we do provide it for individuals with disabilities, of course, those who qualify for Medicaid and have the capabilities of getting to and from their doctor's appointments. And we also provide it for veterans as well. So, and for seniors too. So it's available for anyone in Forsyth County. We do provide some service to and from the Veterans Hospital in Kernersville. So that we touch on that aspect. Just making it available for everyone. So just getting to and from medical appointments. We take people grocery shopping. So just going out to outings, just going out to eat, things that we might find simple. And, just having those capabilities of being able to get to a restaurant or going grocery shopping, it's imperative and very important for them to do those types of things.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am.
Jeff, I have a question that came to me. Has there been any discussion about reimagining or relocating the Central Bus Depot downtown?
So that is a very complicated question. I will say this: we have considered what something of that nature would look like. I will say this: we even put some high-level cost assumptions on that, valuing the current space and then what it would take to get the value of that, and then replicate that system, and then overhaul the entire bus network, right? To really facilitate all the service changes to move the primary stop, right, which is the transit center. And the cost forecast is something that the city manager and the city council really haven't hasn't gained a lot of momentum to this date yet. But I will say what we have looked at is a very high level feasibility of moving that, and it identified some key barriers, largely financial, because of how it would be to remap, reservice, really provide a service change for every route, and then how we message that, market that, and then modify all the stops and routes. So Yeah, high level, but the financial burden hasn't been a priority for the city yet.
Right, right. And I can imagine that the ultimate goal for all of the transit authority and the city is to increase ridership. And so looking at opportunities to, possibly have different hubs throughout the community might be another option that you're exploring as well.
So I'll mention this, and RITP Dev is going to hear this for the first time on this call, and I'll expose this, but we've actually just pitched to the city manager's office a 4-year return to pre-COVID numbers. And so we've got a couple million rides we've got to go find and really overhaul. Now that's going to take a lot of work, and Takia and Brandy are going to have to put in, I'm going to ask them to put in a lot of work to help us do that. But we are projecting kind of a 4-year ridership growth plan. Very infant stage today, but a lot of work to come. But these frequency improvements are just one step as we march towards that goal.
Wonderful. Thank you. And I just want to remind our participants to please, if you have any questions, to please put them in the Q&A. I know Frida has been monitoring that, so I'm going to let her take over for a little bit.
All right. We're going to answer some. The Q&A has been on fire, so we're going to answer some of these questions. We're going to depart from our planned kind of script, and I'm just going to read them out kind of one by one as they have come in. Participant from Camilla, question from Camilla. Are there any companies, those providing employment, that are willing to offset the cost if this can be posed in terms of reducing employee tardiness / attrition and increasing company productivity? And any of you can answer that question. Thank you, Camilla, for that.
I know if you're working through Voc Rehab, we work with Voc Rehab to try to offset some of those expenses, not long-term, but short-term, to make sure people can get there and stabilize on a job long enough to prove that they should stay with that employer. But that's a short-term thing that we offer.
I know that IFB is actually somewhere that we provide a lot of transportation services for. I can't really speak to offsetting cost, but I can say that a good majority of people who work there utilize our transaid services.
Last comment that I'll make kind of on this space would be, the city receives a federal subsidy through FTA to administer transit service. And so there are some legal parameters for partnership with private entities and some of the service expectations that come along with those partnerships, where we're held accountable to the FTA. We're not held accountable to private partnerships. And so while those agreements could be considered through legal counsel, we don't have any in place. And really, we are trying to provide public service regardless of any private ties, and just make sure that our routes are administered to move the most people, regardless of who's the financial contributor.
Right.
Thank you all for your answers. We'll move on to the next question that has come in. Transportation from Alec. Transportation is often thought of as vehicles and infrastructure, roads, bridges, airports, etc. And we often focus on investments in transportation facilities and vehicles to address those problems and needs. But better land use can also play a critical role in addressing transportation challenges. Jeff, can you talk about how the Department of Transportation is involved in land use discussions and decisions by the city?
Yes, that is a great point. And one of the biggest barriers to really philosophy change in how we think about transportation is because if you have a density that doesn't support public transit, then you're going to run an insufficient service. So we are, and I say this because I think Alan brings up a good point, that it's a lot of development trends you see, and the hub and spoke model identifies this. You have to go a long ways in many different job centers. They're not often clustered together to promote that density to get on a bus. We have targeted some areas, particularly small area plans, to try to fix some of that. Now there's an opportunity for the city to do better here. And we have recently hired some transportation planners that are really living in that space. And so I think what you'll see is development trends, and there's not a lot of undeveloped property in the city of Winston-Salem at large. That's true. So redevelopment and how we redevelop is going to be, there needs to be a component of public transportation that we consider. Now, a lot of that is making sure that we expose the long-term vision I talked about a moment ago to inform those small area plans. And I think we're trying to do a better job of that. But certainly to Alex's point, there's opportunity in the city of Winston-Salem to do better. And I think moving forward, you're going to see some of that. We are, dealing with some of those decisions from the past at large.
Okay. Thank you, Alec, for that question. Alec, with another question. I'm reading them as order. Actually, I'll go on to Carol, and then Alec, if we have time, I'll come back to yours. Carol asked the question, and let me make sure I'm not, yes. The crosstown routes will be very important to the city and the stops that have high usage. Will there be shelters provided at each of those stops for the comfort and safety of riders? So question as relates to the actual stops, the actual bus stops for riders.
So, again, this is a city type of practice here. So I'll say this. Last year, we adopted a new service amenity standard model. So essentially, there's new standards that say where these type of bus stop accommodations, amenities, we'll just call them the fact that they should be there. So let's just call them really service baseline. But what it does is it establishes some criterion for where these type of treatments go. And it's largely based on ridership and the amount of space we have to put things. Are we going to be knocking down buildings or buying a bunch of property, and really the feasibility of putting these things out there. So I'll say this: the city has about 50 bus shelters in stock today that we are trying to deploy. And to do that over the next 2 years or so, maybe 3, we'll be considering that service amenity standard model to vet these locations, to put them where they're most needed.
Thank you, Jeff. And any of the other panelists, if you have perspective, I know Jeff, he might need a break because it seems like most of these questions are literally directed straight at Jeff, but you are more than welcome to jump in and share your perspectives. We've got some more time, so I'm going to keep on going. What transportation investments are needed to help Winston-Salem best compete economically against other cities and regions? We hear a lot about how Winston-Salem needs to grow in terms of economic development, and transportation is obviously a key component of that. So are there things that you all see what investments can we invest in now to help us compete later?
I think I can take a little bit of that so Jeff can take a breath. Some of the things that we see that could help a great deal is in vehicles. Vehicle cost is a big one. But there are things that prevent that as well, as far as manufacturing. COVID was a huge factor in the downfall of manufacturing of buses. So for example, we could order a bus today and we may not get it for 2 years, because that's the truth of the matter when it comes to manufacturing of vehicles. A lot of the vehicles here are, past their useful life. It's a terminology that we use in the industry. That doesn't mean that they can't be utilized anymore. It just means that they're not as efficient, whether it be in fuel or not breaking down. And so that's one of the things that is going to help in the long run help us to be more efficient, is having vehicles that are not needing maintenance on a daily basis, and those kind of things. So that would be my number one thought on that.
I think Jeff said it earlier, walkability. I think, you can have a bus that goes somewhere, but if you don't have ramps, or you have cracked sidewalks and you're in a wheelchair or have a walker, it's difficult. So I think the walkability of Winston-Salem is important too.
Yeah. All right. Again, this chat is keep our participants, please keep sending them through because I know that our panelists love to answer them. We have a question here or a comment about Durham has increased their ridership significantly over the past few years. One thing they have done is provide fare free rides. Will this be one of the considerations for growing ridership?
I'll take that. So that's great. And certainly I'll just say this, and you heard me talk last time at Leaders at Lunch, I mentioned this exact thing. When we talked about we are considering a future WIS division where there is an option for fare free. Now, there's a lot of challenges and logistics with that about how we actually roll that out consistently and equitably across the board. But I will say we spend a tremendous amount of money to put 1.6 million people on the bus at $1 a ride. In other words, it costs a lot more than $1.6 million to collect $1.6 million. And so that's a real conversation that we're having. And that's more of a strategic priority that our city council needs to weigh in on. And I think the data can support some of that, particularly in certain areas of our city where that would be a major benefit to a lot of folks. And we have to think about that, what that means for buses in our current fleet. You know, if doing so, do we create burden on buses, operators, certain stops? While we want to make sure that, you know, it's not the law of unintended consequences where we roll this out with great intentions, but now we're dealing with overcrowdedness or unsafe environments because of bus stop crowding and expectations about service delivery because there's no credential, there's no dollar bill to load the bus. So all those inform our decisions.
I think the that question actually goes into the next question, which was, what are the best ways for residents to be involved with those city transportation initiatives? Are there any upcoming public meetings or open house events where we can learn more about the initiatives in the city? And what's the best location to find those announcements for when those things are to happen? And if any of you answer that question, Jared can put the links in the chat function for our participants to see today.
Yes, I would love to take that question. So one of the things, again, that RATP Dev has been doing since we got here is kind of assessing everything, including our interactions with the public. So we are looking at making a once quarterly town hall meeting where people can come and ask questions and give their opinions on things and kind of be part of that whole process. We do have a board that meets. We also have an advisory council that we're looking to revamp and kind of get back into action. So all of those things will be available on our website under the What's New tab. We're keeping a lot of information on that What's New. It'll change all the time. So everybody bookmark it because that's where you can get involved and know what's going on.
Thank you. I am going to jump to the chat just to say some of the comments. There's been a lot of thank yous to our panelists for all of the things that you all are sharing with us today, as well as all of the work that you are doing to improve transportation in our community, whether it be for niche communities and for the community as a whole, and as it relates to how we can grow as a city. One of the comments that was made, and I wanted to read this out loud, was possibly to Jeff, is how to get those more rides, make ridership fun. Adding Wi-Fi or partnering with schools on ridership to see if that's a way to increase, especially since there's a bus shortage with Winston-Salem, Forsyth County Schools. So maybe that's a partnership to explore. I don't know if you're prepared to answer that, but that just was one of the comments that came in through the chat. And I think we have one more question that we can answer before we need to wrap up here. The question is from Elise. A lot of funding decisions are not made locally. How can the public and local leaders effectively advocate for safety and multimodal investments at the state and federal levels? Very interesting question.
Yeah, I'll take a high level summary of that. Obviously, start local, stay local as much as you can with your local elected officials. And this needs to be a priority, right? And I'm happy to say if you've been tuning into city council at all, that this year's legislative agenda, city council did adopt a resolution to send to the North Carolina General Assembly to remove the funding limitation for pedestrian funding for pedestrian specific projects. One of the biggest barriers you heard me talk about was getting access to the buses, right? And one of the challenges is funding those type of projects. One of those problems in doing so is the limitation in state law that prohibits independent funding for standalone pedestrian projects. And our council has adopted a resolution adding to their legislative agenda supporting that we remove that limitation for funding. And I think we just need to continue to think about those type of elements to remove those barriers for public transportation.
Thank you, Jeff. Sounds like the answer to that is start local and then have those folks go to the state and then go to federal. So in short, sounds like kind of what you said. But thank you so much for answering that. And thank you all for being with us today. We certainly appreciate your active engagement. Jared, for our participants, Jared has placed lots of different links in the chat function, pointing directly to RATP Dev's website, the What's New tab, as well as the dot.gov tab for your questions in regards to Peters Creek Parkway, and also updates on fairs, and lots of different information in the chat function. So please take note of those here before you leave today. Thank you again to our panelists and to all of you who have joined us, and also to Drew for sharing his family story. We certainly appreciate your partnership and your support of Leadership Winston-Salem. It is recruitment season here at Leadership Winston-Salem. And when I tell you we are very thankful that Jeff is in our class because he was able to join us today as a current flagship class of 2025. If this webinar struck a chord with you and you would like to know more about what we do and what the buzz is all about, please register for an information session on our website at leadershipws.org, or use the link that Jared is putting in the chat. If you're already an alum and know of someone who would love to experience Leadership Winston-Salem, please go to our website and click the Nominate a Candidate button, or use the link that Jared is placing in the chat at this time as well. Just a quick reminder, Leadership Winston-Salem is a nonprofit organization that relies heavily on the support of individual donors and corporate sponsors to provide the array of programming that we do. If you've enjoyed what we've offered today, please consider making a gift to the organization on our website by clicking the Donate button or using the link in the chat. Thank you all for joining us today. Have a wonderful rest of your week. Bye-bye.